Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Santi and today I wanted to talk about an interesting topic, mobile games. But not any mobile games, I wanted to talk about Katamari mobile games. And yes, I use that in a plural because a lot of people think the only two Katamari mobile games that ever existed were Tap My Katamari and Amazing Katamari Damacy. But that's not it. So today I dug a little deep and found myself playing some of these old games. Do keep in mind that all these games I managed to play, and if not play, I found some footage on YouTube. And if that was the case, I will leave the footage link in the description. Without further ado, let's start with the first game of the bunch, Katamari Domasi Mobile. This was the first Katamari mobile game. It was released only in Japan for the Panasonic P904i, which was a mobile device which was trending at the time. This game was a port of the PS2 game with all the 3D models, but a few restrictions. For example, the music, as you could hear in this trailer, it's in MIDI form because they had to save space for this game. It's very laggy because probably this phone wasn't really powerful, so the 3D models were giving it a hard time rendering. But an interesting thing about this game is that it did not use the buttons, because all the buttons on these phones were all mushed together and it would have been hard to control a game like this. So what did they do? Motion controls. That's simple. But this telephone didn't have a gyroscope, a tiltometer, or an accelerometer. So how did they do that? Well, it's quite simple, because they used the camera. And by that I mean they used the movements of the camera to identify which direction the phone was tilting. It did not do a great job, but at least it worked. This game I could not play because it's not on any hardware that I could find and play on, so I had to rely on this video that I found on YouTube. From the date of this video we can understand that this game is quite old, since this video is aged 2007. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that game. Now we're gonna move on to Rolling with Katamari, the first Katamari mobile game to ever be released on a touchscreen device. Now, this one I could actually play since it was released on an older version of Android. But this doesn't mean it was good. This game is pretty bad. If you see what they did with Katamari Domasi Mobile, you would see that this game just pales in comparison. It's a 2D game where you tap the screen in the direction you want the Katamari to go. And already that is a very big compromise, since most Katamari games, if not all, are 3D. The formula is always the same though. You roll up smaller items to become a bigger ball to roll up bigger items. But if you've been paying attention to the footage in the background, you would see that this game has kind of a problem. Yeah, you fly around, like really fast. For some reason, instead of bumping back or losing some pieces like you do in regular Katamari games, maybe for hardware restriction, they decided you to fly into hyperspace every time you bump into an item. It's like you're a pinball ball just flying around hitting bumpers. So I wouldn't recommend this game at all, since it aged like milk. Also, a small note, if you were to listen to the music, yeah, there's none. For some reason, the version I found of this game, even if it did give the option to have audio or not, did not even allow it. So even if I tried to turn on the audio, it did not work. I even tried on my own phone, but it still didn't give me any audio. So I guess we will never know what was the soundtrack for this game. The game over screen is kinda bland. It's just a gray background with the grumpy king in the middle and the sad prince in the corner. And he just gives you a lecture. That's not really what you would expect from a Katamari game, where the king usually gets more violent of sorts, if you know what I mean. Well, that was it for this game. Let's move on to the next game of the bunch, I Love Katamari, the first to be released both on Android and iOS. Now, this was more of a regular Katamari game. since you were able to do most of the moves you do in a Katamari game. This one also uses tilt controls, which were pretty bad. I also had tested them when the game was still downloadable from the app stores, but then they fixed that with an update, so now it's playable, at least. This game has 5 stages and 4 game modes. We will talk about the game modes later, but now let's focus on the stages. There are stages taken from the original Katamari Domasi game, and they all also use music from Katamari Domasi, this time in a normal form and not in MIDI as in Katamari Domasi Mobile. The 4 game modes are actually quite interesting because there's a story mode, a time trial, a size challenge, and an eternal mode for each stage. The story mode for this game is quite interesting since you have to roll a specific item instead of rolling to a specific size. For example, in the first stage, it's a calico cat that you can find in a garden. The time attack is obviously the classic Katamari mode. The size challenge is where you don't have actually your size on the screen, but you have to approximately reach it, and the eternal mode is you can roll up whatever you want for how much time you want. You can see that this game had a lot of compromises though, because you can see the textures are very low quality, but this had to be done because the 3D models take a lot of processing power to render, and the devices back then were not really that powerful. So they had to do this compromise to make the game at least playable. This is a solid game. You can still play it on Android if you find it online, and I would really suggest that if you want to have a legit Katamari experience on your mobile device. And now we will talk about, in my opinion, the best Katamari mobile game, which is Katamari Amor. This one could be thought as a I Love Katamari 2 of sorts, with better levels, better graphics, and generally better in everything. This game, unlike I Love Katamari, has got a whopping 21 stages, plus 1 base stage and 3 bonus stages. Each one of the stages has the old game modes that I Love Katamari had, and they all consist of basically the same thing. You have to collect an item for the story mode, time attack is the same, size challenge is still the same, and eternal hasn't changed. The controls have changed though, because you are restricted to using motion controls now, because you can also use a single stick or double stick, depending on what you prefer. This, unlike I Love Katamari, was a free game that you could buy level packs for. There were 3 level packs, which were Have a Nice Trip, Time Trip, and Rolling Whopper. You can probably guess what the first 2 level packs are about. But what about Rolling Whopper? What's that? Well, Rolling Whopper is about, believe it or not, the United States of America, where the king wants to know more about the American culture, and there was an entire level pack dedicated to the history and the American culture. This game had one single flaw though. Since it was such a big game, it required a lot of performance power, and so it ran poorly on iPhones, since this game was only released for iOS and not for Android. So the game ran perfectly on iPads, but lagged a lot on iPhones. Now I wanted to talk about the bonus stages of this game. They're really interesting since each one of them is inspired by another Namco IP. And there are the Pac-Man level, the Tekken level, and the Galaga level. They all still follow the classic Katamari formula, but give a little twist, just to make them feel a little more unique. About the music, the entire soundtrack for this game is an original, and I would really suggest to go find it on YouTube since it's really good. And that wraps it up for Katamari Amore. Now let's go and talk about the last game of the bunch. Let's Make a Planet, everyone's Katamari Domasi. This is theoretically not an official Namco game since it was licensed by Namco, but was not officially created by Namco. It was made by Charoom, which is a Japanese game developing studio which mainly focuses on mobile games. This game is an endless runner, similar to Amazing Katamari Domasi, but it also has its own little twist. You have a certain size that you have to reach with your Katamari at the end of the timer. You can roll up stuff, and you get slowed down by the items you cannot roll up. You can also roll up coins and gems. Coins get added to your general coin counter, while gems, if you collect 5 of them, you get a small boost in speed for a little time, which really helps in a game where you have a tight time limit. You can also buy upgrades with those coins. There are two types of upgrades, which are the time upgrades and the size upgrades. The time upgrades give you a more generous time limit, while the size upgrades make your Katamari start size bigger, which helps a lot with reaching the certain sizes that the king gives you, since they get bigger and bigger every time. I don't think this was ever released on iOS, but if it was, I'll be gladly proven wrong. And in all honesty, this is a pretty good game. I play it every once in a while when I'm kinda bored, and I think it's pretty neat. Honestly, if you have an Android device, I really suggest you try this game out, even though the game is all in Japanese, but you really don't need to understand what's written, since I don't think the story is really important in that game. And on that note, we wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing. I hope to see you all in my next video, and cut.